Damos sequência à nossa conferência com o painel que vai abordar Previdência complementar, possibilidades de um futuro comum. E assim convidamos inicialmente o mediador deste painel, o senhor Lúcio Capelletto, do Conselho Nacional de Previdência Complementar do Ministério do Trabalho e Previdência. Também o diretor superintendente da Superintendência Nacional de Previdência Complementar, senhor José Roberto Savoia. Convidamos também o professor da Escola de Sociologia da Universidade de Leeds, na Inglaterra, senhor Simon Prideaux, ou simplesmente Simon, como ele gosta de ser chamado. Recém-aposentado, Simon é um estudioso renomado mundialmente no tema Disabilities and Welfare State e é coordenador do grupo de pesquisa Injustice International.
Thank you.
Com a palavra o mediador, Lúcio Capelletto.
Boa tarde a todos. É um prazer mediar esse painel aqui com dois ilustres professores doutores, o professor Simon, lá da Universidade de Leeds, onde tem justamente uma área de pesquisa em bem-estar social, estudos sobre a deficiência e crime, na Escola de Sociologia na Universidade de Leeds, e trata aqui de controvérsias entre a seguridade social pública e privada, fará uma apresentação para nós. O professor doutor Savoia, diretor superintendente da Previc, aqui presente, da FEA USP, fomos colegas lá, somos oriundos dessa escola e tem uma larga experiência, além da própria formação na área de previdência. Então, sejam bem-vindos. Vou começar a apresentação pelo professor Simon, por favor.
Right. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a great honour. And I think it's been organised really well. So I think really you should give a big clap for the organisers and the people that have been looking after it all. As I think they said, I'm Simon, not the Professor Simon, just Simon will do. I've retired from the University of Leeds, but I've got bored with retirement, so I'm arguing to go to the University of Bradford. So in the next few months you might find out different. I'm the co-founder, founder, and director of Injustice International, which is sponsoring, well, it's not sponsoring, it's supporting this event. So, I was pleased to be invited, and I was asked to do a methodology. Now, I'm not going to, with these slides, I'm not going to read everything to you, because if I do, you'll be bored, and I'll be bored, and then we won't have a good time at all. Because when I get bored, I get up to things. So there is a methodology there. And it's quite confusing in many ways, because I deliberately put acronyms in, like OBR, IEA, IFS. There's also ONS to go at as well. But they're from the facts and figures of reports from the Office of Budget Responsibilities, the IFS, which is the Institution of Fiscal Studies, And there's various of them, there's lots of them. So I had access to that. And I also accessed green and white papers because they show you the ideas and thinking behind the acts of Parliament. So you want to know the motives for introducing an act. And you can get behind it so you can find what the government is really thinking when it changes your ability to get a pension or it lowers your social security. It tells you about what they think of you. So if you think politics is not part of this, you're wrong. Politics is what you live, eat and breathe. What you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And managerialism, because we're living in now a privatization syndrome with this global market, privatization, managerialization are part and parcel of the direction I feel Brazil's going down. And this presentation is just going to be a warning that if you follow the line that the UK did, you're going to have a multitude of problems. So I'm not criticising Brazil, I'm criticising the UK and saying, please don't go down that line. Take a Brazilian way of doing it. You know, like your football team, you play football better than anybody. So, I know I was going to burn it on this year on stage just to liven you all up, but no, you play the best football in the world. So use that creativity, use those thought processes, and learn from the mistakes that I'm going to point out. And then think about how you'd like to make changes for Brazil, how you'd like to be creative. Because if you just do methodology, it only tells you how things are at that present time. It doesn't tell you if it's bad. If it doesn't tell you, you can see it's bad, but it doesn't tell you how to get out of that. So you need to look at theories. You need to use your creative minds. Think out of the box. Don't get boxed in by things. Start thinking, well, hang on. I think, you know, you have this gut feeling, this is wrong. I can prove it's wrong. And then I know why we've got there. So you look at the history, and you look at comparative history as well. So you think, I know how we got there, and I believe that we can get out of here, which is a catastrophe, by doing such and such and such and such. That's where your creativity comes into it. So you do the thinking. You think with your guts and your heart and say, this is the way forward. And stick by it. Don't fall for this is the way you have to be. This is the way you should conform. Because the global market is ruling everything. Just think about it and say, well, it's not ruling Brazil. So, but with this Congress, I mean, it's a glorious thing. And I looked at the title and I just looked at it all together and I thought, hang on, there's a problem here. There's a problem with this idea of social security management. How do you envisage managing social security? So how do you envisage social security? What does it involve? I'll say more about that a bit later. But people, they're not all the same. Some will do as they're told, some won't. So if you told me what to do, which has happened earlier in my recruitment to do this, you won't get it. So the methodology wasn't that good, deliberately so, but it was better than the first version, which was quite destructive. So I don't do as I'm told. So these people that are going to manage Social Security, how would they manage me? How would they get me to do what I should do without me being a trouble causer? So you really got to think about these concepts. It's not so easy just to tell somebody to do something. Social security claimants, they have minds of their own. We're all different. Human beings are all different. I mean, for instance, how do you interpret social security? Well, does anybody not have an idea? Do you have an interpretation? Bring it up when the questions. Not bring it up, you tell me, because I'm not going to tell you, other than what's on these slides. So are you referring to security as in, you know, you're secure that the people are fending off crime against you? Or are you talking about your welfare, about your well-being? And if you're poor, how do you rectify and create a system which looks after your welfare? And when you're ill, because the poorest are ill more prominently than the wealthy, have you got a system that will look after them properly? You need to think about that. On social security, do you just mean benefits? That is money for being unemployed, helping you get your pensions, so there's all payments for that. So you've got to start including them all together and building a bigger picture, and stop thinking it's so easy to manage it, because you hear it in the newspapers. No, you can't hear it in the newspaper. Hear it on the telly, you read it in the newspapers, and it's, oh, we'll manage this, we'll manage that. Well, I'm sorry, managers are not always as good as what they think they are. So start thinking what should be done. And is management on a short-term basis or a long-term? You know, I mean, best management is on a long-term basis. You have to think of years to come. And then you have to think how your management of an individual will benefit that individual, will support that individual. Not saying, I'll tell them they've got to do this and put them under pressure. You don't do that. It doesn't work. And I know it doesn't work because I used to run big warehouses, bigger than this. And if you operated like that, you just wouldn't get results. You need to build teams. You need to get them together. You need to reward those teams with just even saying good words about them when they've done well. So that's more of a longer view. And so if you mix it into the idea of social security, which involves loads of different benefits, especially in the UK, how do you manage them all? Because they're all different. So you're going to get confused about that. So it's, I mean, I could go on with the next slides for about 20, 22 minutes each. But I'm sure you wouldn't like that. So, social security, do you mean welfare? Hence the welfare state in the UK. And that's basically welfare, which I think you should look at, is protection against poverty. That's a biggie over here. But it's getting bigger because of all the mistakes that are being made in UK. UK's got in high growth in poverty. We have nurses who worked through the pandemic who can't afford to buy food. So they have to use what we call food banks and get it for free. It's a disgrace. Every Thursday, everybody got out at a certain time and clapped these nurses. Now the government's not paying them. Not enough, anyway. So you have to look at education as well and the provision of opportunity. So I know in Brazil that you have a system where education is supposed to be free. But have a look at that. Because what does it mean? And what do they mean by education? You need to get into the minutiae. Because does education mean you've got to all graduate from primary schools or whatever? Or does it mean something else? And is it applicable to everybody? So are these schools, say, everywhere, for every child? And what do they teach? Do they make assumptions? Oh, well, you're poor. We'll teach you to be a manual worker. We'll teach you to do boring jobs. At least you're getting some money. Bet you bottom dollar they don't think you could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. You could be whatever you wanted to be. And put the time in to help them develop and get out of poverty. So, look at the people in the favelas. The only way out of poverty I can see is to be a damn good footballer. So I might be destroying Brazil as a football nation by saying they shouldn't be in poverty. Then they wouldn't have to get out of it, would they? By playing football. But who knows? You should be looking at health provision. Free at the point of delivery. So health shouldn't be you shouldn't have to pay. It should be free. Unemployment, you should get benefits so you don't fall into poverty. Not minimum benefits, benefits that will keep you out of poverty. Now I know that's part of another argument, because there's a Charles Murray, if you've ever heard of him, he says that there's perverse incentives for people to stay on social security. And if you do that, you're paying them not to work. Now, I spent a career ruining his thoughts because I've proven him wrong that many times. It's unbelievable. But governments still take on board what he had to say. So these people, they don't want to work. They're idle. They live a life of crime, so they're thieves. You know, they don't want to obey the rules. And they have high incidences of illegitimacy. Where he gets that from, I'll never know, because birth rates across nations is going down. But apparently it's all down to the underclass, as he calls it, that are breeding all the time and not looking after them because the men walk off. And we also need to look at supplementary benefits for those in work so that they get a minimum wage, more than that if possible. So you have universal credit, so you can still be working, but you'll get benefits. Or you used to, should I say. Pensions. Look at them. State pensions. Are they actually secure in the end? Private pensions. Are they secure? Or are they subject to market variations? Are they subject to economic downfalls? Keep asking yourselves these things. And then, for all of that, you need to pay taxes. You need to get taxes. Government has to get the revenues to get the money to pay the pensions and so on. But again, under these conditions of market confidence, which the UK has been hit hard with, the market confidence has plummeted. It has meant we've had an economic downturn within about 3 weeks because of some mad political decisions. They won't shoot me when I get back, don't worry, because they've got sacked. But that means, because of the economy going down, there's jobs being lost, there's people not working, not paying taxes, means government revenues going down, and it means they haven't got the money to pay what they've promised. So it makes it even gloomier. This is why I'm saying, Brazil, please don't go down that line. So the thing is all premised by neoliberalism. And I'm not going to read it out. You can read it yourselves. But the point about that is a trickle-down effect, where people will work, be happy. You'll find your natural place. It's like a big pyramid. And you'll find where you belong and you'll be happy with your lot. Yeah. Because it forgets that with competition, there's always winners and there's losers. And it's the losers that won't be happy. And they might not deserve to be losers, but they're stuck in that predicament. But the successful, so the argument goes, would then reinvest in businesses, expand their own, start new businesses. Utter nonsense. It's benevolence. First of all, it doesn't mention that individuals are greedy. Some individuals keep their money. They want their money. Shareholders want their money. They want their profits. So once they demand the money, you've got an economic downturn and you've got a government with decreasing revenue, payments for the benefits and they're keeping you out of poverty are non-existent. Now, one answer is Charles Murray's work, is you just don't pay benefits because they're just idle and they think like any of us, but they know that's the best route for them. No, that's pure nonsense as far as I'm concerned. But for a government, it's quite enticing because if you can cut benefits, unemployment benefits especially, and say they deserve their benefits cutting, it means you've got less money more money to spend somewhere else. So please don't go down that way. And then you've got this, I don't know, this idea of market confidence. But that doesn't work when you've got what is called stagflation in the UK. So that's a stagnant economy and rampant inflation. And so people lose confidence and shareholders lose their confidence. Market people lose their confidence, which means people have to sell countries have to sell their gilts. Shareholders sell their shares so they can maximise the profits while they're still there, which then puts a load of other companies in jeopardy. Private pensions, that has happened a lot in the UK. They've been jeopardised, they've been destroyed, and they're failing to deliver what they promised when people took private pensions out. So let's not go down that line, please. I'm trying to be nice. So you've got a reverse of what this trickle-down effect is all about in a gloomy economy. But as I say, you can read that later on. This great idea of privatisation, what do you get? Well, in the UK, you have involvement in educational establishments, you have people actually paying tuition fees now. When I first, many moons ago, when I was a lad, education was free for all at every level. Now, the students have to pay £9,000 a year. They get a grant, but it's £9,000 a year, which excludes the poorest. So you're not saying you're giving those opportunities to become doctors, lawyers, lecturers even. You're not giving it because you're getting them to pay money they don't have. So you're excluding them. Then you have health provision. Oh, they said, well, we can't build any more hospitals. We don't have any more funding. The state's on a downturn. Well, we'll get private companies in. And what did they do? It's called the PFI schemes, which is private finance initiatives. So they get them in, and these private companies build the new hospitals. And you think, great. So the private companies have forked out all this money, built these hospitals, and I've got to finish. Yeah. I knew this was going to happen. So they've done all that, but they then get the hospitals to sign a 30-year lease, which means they have to pay a big sum each year. And they still haven't paid it off after the 30 years, so they have to renegotiate another lease. So the private companies are making massive profits off hospitals who should be looking after us. while we're ill. And the youth seem to be the answer to this. So I'll just skip through that. And there's been a series of schemes. The youth training scheme under Thatcher. I didn't spit it this time. I normally spit the word Thatcher. Terrible, terrible woman. I was dancing when she died, don't you worry, in the street. They had new deals from New Labour. Well, they're just conservatives in sheep's clothing. You know, they were no better. And then you had youth training in general. Now that's your future. So you should be training them properly. But what they did was set up these training schemes that the private companies, employers, get subsidised wages for every individual on that scheme for 6 months. So you get, and they got £1,000 for training now, obvious things like that. And they're making so much money on it. But there's no guarantee that they have to make these people full-time employees. So in competition, these companies, they've got an incentive to keep turning these 6-month trainees over and over again. So once they're 6 months up, don't employ them, get a new lot of trainees. And you get to keep all that money you're making, because you're only paying half the wage, even less. And it's still going on. That's how Boris, you know what I mean by Boris? Anybody? You know the big bumbling clown that makes me look thin? And he takes some doing that. Well, him, who can't speak, if you ask me, but he's carried it on with his little partner, little Rishi. Sunak, who's now Prime Minister. Oh, my God. And I'm going to stay in Brazil, I'll tell you. But they're doing that all the way through. And you want to read these slides because it'll give you all that. But you also need to add in demographic considerations. So birth rates are falling. But like the NHS was successful. So people were living longer, claiming pensions. But you're going to, in the future, because there's no golden honeypot waiting for you, it's not all the money that you've earned and paid for over time. No, because when you were working, you paid for the people on benefits at that time. So when you retire, the people working pay for the people on benefits at that time. Now, if your future workers have decreased and your government's lost a lot of tax revenue and you're living longer, they don't have the money to do it. So again, please don't go down these lines. I've mentioned youth education because they lack that ambition. They lack this idea that the working poor, the poor, their children cannot be doctors, lawyers. And if you want to read Gramsci's prison notebooks, that'll fill you in on the theory about how the southern peasants hated the lawyers and doctors in the north. And yet the dialectic is they wanted their children to be doctors, lawyers of the north. So they still have the same aspirations. But we're not giving them that chance. Cut it out. You don't deserve to be a doctor. You don't come from public schools or anything like that, which all our politicians basically do. I've mentioned the perverse incentives for employers, and I'll leave Boris and Rishi alone because you'll just get all conjecture. But what I think is you need to learn from the fact that these perverse incentives are being given to the wealthy, are being given to employers, and it has a negative effect. There's no obligations for employers to take on trainees. There's no obligations for employers to give a proper education. Training could mean anything like how to use a photocopier. And it doesn't have to last 6 months. You just teach them within a week and say, get on with it. And then that's your job done after 6 months, and that's all you've learned. There's also geographical disparities that you have to look at because some areas are poorer than others. So you've got to build all this big picture and be more holistic in what you're looking at. Otherwise, you're just going to flounder. Just to finish off, because I know he's going mad there. Just remember, people are not the same. They're not politically unified. They have different attitudes. And it's greed versus benevolence in many simplistic terms. But what I'm asking you, what do you mean by managing people? People from the organisation that runs this. What do you mean by that? What do you want to achieve? And then I'm asking the rest of you, what should be done? Which is a different thing. And what is really happening in Brazil? Can you see how you can avoid it? So what do you, not me, propose to do about it? Thank you.
Obrigado, professor. Trouxe bastantes questões, algumas bastante controversas, que exigem uma reflexão, e claro, que a reflexão sobre elas traz um aprimoramento da seguridade social e dos próprios fundos de pensão, que agora vou passar a palavra para o professor José Roberto Savoia. Por favor, professor.
Obrigado. Inicialmente, fazer meus cumprimentos em português, depois a gente passa para a apresentação em inglês, em deferência ao nosso professor. Eu, inicialmente, tinha preparado um tema, mas que foge bastante da visão que nos foi dada aqui pelo professor Simon. Então, eu vou pedir permissão para poder fazer alguma discussão em torno desses tópicos. Simon, your presentation is not similar to mine, so I apologize for not showing all my slides and just to take another conversation with our audience and with you about the issues you mentioned and what about this can be discussed and solved and came into a framework to the Brazilian people. But first of all, the Brazilian society is very generous. So we use this as a complement to fixed pensions in a really high level of expenditures. Our expenditures are about 14% of our GDP. We are in the same level of some of the most important countries in the European Union. Our GDP is higher than in Germany, is higher than France, is more or less like Italy or so. So why do we have this situation? Because on the last 40 years, just after the amendment of the Constitution of 1988, we made several changes in our pensions, and we provided benefits larger than we could receive on our traditional revenues. Our traditional revenues were not enough to support all the expenditures. So we made a huge effort of public expenditure to keep the benefits under control. Answering the proposition of Simon, the view in Brazil of social security is something similar to England and the UK in a general sense. We do have a health system that is free for all. We do have educational system that is free for everybody. until college and post or graduate studies included. So we have a very similar situation that a developed country, and we could see Brazil in the model of Spink Anderson, like one of those more generous countries like Sweden, Finland, and so on. So we are moving into this conception. But what happened in the middle of the road? We made a small transition. In 1998, we made a constitutional amendment to say that the Brazilian government is not totally responsible for the pensions and benefits of all. So every Brazilian should make its own efforts to support their retirement expenses. Saying that, we started to make an incentive to private pensions, but we did not want to make the privatization of pensions in Brazil. It was not the case of Chile, the case of some other Latin American countries and other East European, Western European countries. We stayed with our conception of a model guided by the state with some participation of the private sector. And the private sector used it to have some other products which are similar to the product that they sell all over the world, which are defined contribution plans, and we have many of them. They are as large as our complementary pensions, the system that we manage, and my friend Lúcio was the manager before me. We have approximately 28% of our GDP in pension plans and private plans issued and managed by financial institutions. In this size, we came into the 2008 crisis that affected all the world and made many changes in Brazil and many changes in the whole developed world. I have some studies on this issue, and what I synthesize in terms of comparison of Brazil and OECD countries is that when the 2008 crisis came, we lost our long-term perspective, and we focused on short-term fiscal control. All the countries. And this was a rupture, and this was really something that had several effects, side effects. Joseph Stiglitz used to say that our decisions did not consider second-order effects when we started to reform pensions during 2009, 2010. And those second-order dimensions are specifically those. First, what is the level of support you can promote in our society? What is the level of decommodification? Is a strange word, but it's the idea that you depend on the state or you depend on the market. And nobody had no clear idea of what had happened to which level of decommodification we should have. And it is still going back and forth in order to make some adjustment to this issue. There were several constraints on the working market. Salaries were decreased, and many other consequences came. In many countries, unemployment raised up to 12, 13, 14%, and Brazil also had this situation. Now we are back to 8%. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we will finish this year with 8.5% of unemployment. And so we made a great job in reducing unemployment. But many countries in the OECD did not achieve this level. So we had another transition that was very important, that was how to provide less risk in the private sector. What is this? The risk of the private sector is the variance of the returns of all assets. If you see what is going on the European community, you do not have inflation-linked bonds in the same proportion that we have here, ou NTNs-B, se vocês quiserem fazer paralelo. So, in Brazil, we had our portfolio of pension funds with NTN-Bs, and a traditional pension fund can support all this hike in inflation without constraints, without severe damages. But it does not happen in Europe. The European Union does not have the same pattern for all countries. UK has some gilts and some structured treasury bonds linked to inflation, and this is what is doing, an accommodation of the inflationary risks. The second issue is that when you do not have, for sure, the idea that you're gonna have this money in the future, you do not have this amount that you need to receive an annuity that will help you to survive and to make your living, you make uncomfortable, and you can say, okay, I'm gonna save more, or I'm gonna put my money in more risky assets. And to save more sometimes is not easy for someone that is above 40 years old, with family, with children, with payments of school and other issues. And it's not obvious that he will or she will prefer to have more risky assets in the portfolio. So we are seeing some confusion among the pensioners. They are really upset with the escalade of inflation, and many of them do not know what to do. In our case, in the Brazilian case, we are stimulating the medium class, the lower medium class, to save. And we established some pension plans, especially for those who are not covered by traditional PGBLs and other fundos de pensão. We do have some possibilities in the future to create, like Lúcio mentioned, some kind of special pensions for middle class. And middle class in Brazil is very unstable. We had an increase of our middle class in the beginning of the 2000 and 2010. The middle class increased a lot. And then the number of people that declined their wealth over 2010 was dramatic. And we lost our middle class. So the bottom of our middle class, they started to become poor, and they could not save more for that reason. We are very dependent on our jobs, but unfortunately, 30% of us, 60 million Brazilians, they are not employed in the regular market, in the formal market. They are informal women and men, and they do really need to make a contribution to a special kind of pension plan that they could save for their retirement. And this is the great challenge the Brazilian Social Security will face in the next years, because all the others are running well. And just to make you understand a little more of our system, we still have a social assistance program that is called Auxílio Brasil, and it will change the name in the future. And Auxílio Brasil provides half of our minimum wage. And with this benefit, we are walking to what could be some kind of permanent basic income in the model that we have in some countries and some localities. This kind of benefit will be very important in the future, but it's not permanent. It's temporary. And so we're going to have to decide what to do with this. So in order to conclude my discussion, is that Brazil has some advantages in this moment in relation to OECD countries, because we are in a more sustainable situation with our private pensions. We expend more in our social security than other countries, and we will have to use all the talent, all the digitalization, all the knowledge to keep this budget as low as possible. But unfortunately, it will depend on the conditions to increase the number of formal jobs. And it is not so easy in a situation that we have been finishing a severe crisis that was the COVID-19 crisis. So I will prefer to discuss and with our audience, and my slides will be available for you, but they are not related to all we discussed here now, okay? Thank you.
Obrigado, professor Savoia, brilhante apresentação. Nós agora temos um tempo para as perguntas, né? Até para respondê-las. Tivemos duas brilhantes apresentações, uma trazendo questões justamente sobre o papel, né, do Social Security, da parte, né, da Seguridade Social, e a exposição do professor Savoia mostrando na evolução e o momento que nós temos no Brasil. É uma coisa certa que a gente, né, trabalhou em termos de previdência complementar, ela tem, né, um aspecto importantíssimo, tanto social quanto econômico. Quanto maior a capacidade da população da sociedade em ter a sua previdência, a sua poupança previdenciária, a sua previdência complementar, mais de você desonera a poupança previdenciária social. E ela realmente pode ser mais bem alocada para aqueles mais vulneráveis. E, obviamente, né, lado social também, de quando você estiver na idade em que você já não consegue mais trabalhar, né, você tem a manutenção da sua qualidade de vida. E, pelo lado econômico, quando você tem uma poupança, que foi mencionado pelo professor Savoia, de 28% do PIB, e esperamos que isso cresça, países da OCDE têm 100% do PIB, em termos de média, né, você tem aí uma capacidade de investimento. Costumo dizer que o único recurso que você tem de longo prazo, dentro, né, comparando com bancos, sistema financeiro, é na previdência complementar. É onde você tem, né, dentro dos fundos de pensão, ali um recurso que pode ser realmente alocado no longo prazo. Então, tem aspecto social, o aspecto econômico, que tem que ser, né, considerado. Olhando em termos de perguntas, por favor, Vanessa. As perguntas são feitas por vocês aí, como é que funciona? Vocês botam na tela, vocês psicografam? Não. Não.
Boa tarde. É uma pergunta para o professor Simon. Vou fazer em português.
Vou fazer em português. But you now is acquainted with Portuguese? Yes. No. Okay. Close.
Ok. Não é interessante melhorar ou mudar a educação gratuita e ensinar o que realmente importa? Isso pode ser a mudança na educação pública, né, principalmente, pode ser uma forma de empoderar as pessoas e, então, criar um dificultador ou inviabilizar um pouco o controle sobre elas.
Are you kidding with me?
Pode falar sobre isso?
Would you like that I translate all of this to him? I have to read. I don't remember what you say. What you have said. That's. You have the traduction. Maybe you can put this. I think it will work better. If you read very slow, then I can translate to him. But okay. Now it will work. No, not okay.
Som? Posso? Professor, me ouve?
It's all right, I'm working now.
Ok.
I think you're going to read in English. Oh, please, thank you.
Não é interessante melhorar ou mudar a educação gratuita, pensando que isso pode ajudar a empoderar a população, as pessoas? Ainda não?
Yes, okay.
Tem. Tá traduzindo.
Vai, continua.
Bom, eu vou repetir, vou voltar então na pergunta, terceira vez, vamos lá, agora acho que vai dar certo. Não é interessante melhorar ou mudar a educação, a forma como a educação gratuita é ofertada, é oferecida, pensando em conteúdos que realmente importam e que possam empoderar as pessoas, a população que tem acesso a esse serviço, para que seja um pouco mais difícil ou crie um dificultador para manter o controle sobre elas? O professor pode falar um pouco mais sobre isso?
Thank you for the question, but I didn't understand a word of it. I'm sorry, I don't speak Portuguese. I know it's my weakness and failing, but if I don't know what you're asking, I can't answer it.
Hi, so hello. I'm gonna try to read it already in English. So this time it will go. We can do it. So the question is basically asking if it wouldn't be interesting to simply change / improve the free education, and they say like teach what really matters. I don't know exactly what they would mean by that. What would really matter? And how could this empower people? And if this would make it harder to keep control over them. So if you give people more chances to choose whatever they want to do, you wouldn't be able to control them, and then they ask you to talk a little bit more about it.
Well, it is about social control. The thing is, so what if people are harder to control? I mean, really, that might make you harder to control. But is it really a government's duty to control? Because if it's a democracy, then actually governments should be representing the people, not the other way round. So the people should be controlling the government. I'm sorry for turning it around, but they should be the ones saying, no, that's not what we voted for you for. You stick to what you said. And input, add more, because the more education you get means you could add to it and develop it rather than be uncontrollable, as some would like to call you. Just because you don't agree or you can see the fault in something doesn't mean you need controlling and shutting up. You know, you need listening to, so you can develop and help in that development. Because I'm sure, like the INSS, whatever, yeah, they're not having bad intentions. They want to do well for everyone. But if you think of some good ideas, you should be able to express them, and hopefully they should be taken on board. I know that's making work for you, but I'm like that. Does that answer anything?
No questions? Okay. There is no more questions. I don't know, Professor Savoia, would you like to complement falar alguma coisa?
Okay. I believe that education is something that makes you feel free and not conducted. Education, good education, helps you to open your mind. It depends on you. You can study in a school and they will give you only Marx and Engels, but you can go to the library and read Galbraith. You can read Keynes. You can do everything that you want. So I just can agree with this kind of proposition if you're telling about very young children. But when somebody goes to be a teenager or above, they are free to read and discuss everything they want. My kids, they don't study only at the school. My kids, they take the internet and they read about whatever they want. They can read about things that I didn't study in high school. They can do it by themselves. It depends on everyone. So what the government should do is to provide access to education and this could have a minimum program for everybody, but I believe we should have more emphasis to provide opportunities to everybody study by themselves. That is what really important. One thing that we see very frequently in Brazil are our students using internet during class, and they are not seeing something that is important to their life, that will enlarge their knowledge, but something that is TikTok and Instagram and things like that. So I believe we are using some digital instruments that are very important by the wrong side. And I really believe I had a very free education 40 years ago, but I always did that. I went to read whatever I want, and I could read it at the library of my school, and it was a public school.
Bom, muito obrigado, professor Savoia. Thank you very much, Professor Simon. Nós podemos, então, concluir esse painel. Teremos agora o coffee break. Teremos mais uma sessão?
Com licença. Temos mais uma pergunta e a gente consegue encerrar, e está direcionada para o senhor José Savoia. Como pensar em previdência complementar para os vulneráveis que não têm acesso hoje à educação previdenciária e financeira? Isso é possível? Quais os reflexos dessa situação para o futuro do Estado brasileiro? E aí, senhor Savoia, eu vou pedir para ser o mais objetivo possível na fala, tá? Muito obrigada.
Well, we do have many initiatives of financial education, and especially we have this week the NF, the National Financial Education Meeting, and we are introducing financial education in the grade of our, in the curriculum of our elementary schools. So we can change this in some years, but we need to make something, and then I will ask a little help. The best way to improve financial education to the others is by internet, with our apps, just like we did with Auxílio Brasil. We use this technology to send brief messages to our seniors and also the people above 20 years old. We can really do an impressive job with financial education.
Muito obrigado, professor, mais uma vez. Bom, senhores, eu tinha recebido a informação da organização do evento que a próxima sessão seria às 4h30. O coffee break está servido, então acho que dá para rapidamente irmos, e às 4h30 retornamos para... Yes. Ok, so let's finish. No, we'll finish. No. Bom, obrigado a todos. Ok, obrigado.